Gorgeous, 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 gorgeous. Also nauseatingly repulsive and therefore confusing. Better than food, man. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. Thank you very much to everybody who has bought a book from our new Better Than Food bookstore. We really, really sincerely appreciate it. We hope you're enjoying them. And for anybody who hasn't stopped by, please come check it out on Instagram. The link is below. Thank you so much. Get that coffee. Delicious. Today is Murder Most Serene by Gabrielle Wittkop, the original French Serenissime Assassinat, published in 2001. And thank you very much to the translator of today's book, Louise Rogers Lalurie, for making the short video on YouTube with the pronunciation very close to the beginning, because it really helps. For somebody who does not speak French, which is unfortunately me. And I think that title is a play on the Latin, and here's where it gets pretentious, Serenissima Respublica, which means Most Serene Republic, which according to Wikipedia is a title given to certain European states throughout history. But in this case, it's referring to the Republic of Venice, the Most Serene Republic, which lasted from the year 697 all the way up to Napoleon's invasion in 1797. Incredible history, and one I knew absolutely nothing about, which is one of the reasons why I enjoyed this book very much, because it's kind of a little bit of a, just a glimpse of the history of that city, which of course, as we've all seen photos, is astoundingly beautiful. So, I knew absolutely next to nothing about it, up until this review, for no good reason at all, just hadn't studied up on it yet. But now, I'm fascinated. Venice is such an interesting city. The fact that it was built on these cut down trees that they stuck in the sea, and then they all like kind of grew together and calcified into stone. It's like this, and it's ancient. It's this really, in this lagoon. It's just because of its, the surrounding water, it fended off control from other parties for quite a long time. It's just a very compelling, mysterious, seductive place. And I need to go over there immediately before it goes underwater. So I'm very excited, regarding this book, about this conflagration of engaging subjects. I love history, I love art history, and I love the darker side of art and history and literature. So naturally, one would think I would enjoy this book, and I did. Definitely. Gorgeous, 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 gorgeous. Also nauseatingly repulsive and therefore confusing. This was sent to me by Wakefield Press. Thank you very much, Mark. I really appreciate it. They're one of the greatest publishers out there today. I highly suggest if you haven't read anything by them, you stop by their website and check it out immediately. Full disclaimer, I'm partially sponsored by them in that they send me free books. It's a treasure chest of oddities and stuff like, well, if you like what I like, you're gonna like it. There's really too much to discuss and talk about in this review, so I'm going to try and give you an introduction and maybe a brief overview to one of my new favorite authors. She's rapidly becoming one of my favorites of all time. Dead serious. Haha. But first, today's video is sponsored by Nordgreen. This story is set in Venice, Italy, one of the most romantic and beautiful cities in Europe. One can't help but think of beauty and romance. And on that topic, Valentine's Day is coming up, a time that, for me, is a great opportunity to express my deep love for the ones that I'm close to. And I'd say that Valentine's Day should not just be limited to one's spouse or significant other. There's no reason why one shouldn't express their love to friends and family for the holiday, regardless of whether you're single or not. Now, while a trip to Venice would certainly be a very nice gift, I think something ideal would be a little bit more practical. That's why today's sponsor, Nordgreen, is the perfect Valentine's Day gift. Nordgreen is a Danish watch company from Copenhagen that sells watches designed by the award-winning Jakob Wagner. They're a company that deeply cares about people and the environment, and they have a real emphasis on sustainability, ensuring that all steps from production to shipping to delivery be sustainable. And they have a very tasteful selection of both men and women's watches. And these watches really are stunning. This is the Pioneer model 42mm gold with a black face and a black croc leather strap. Not actual crocodile, but Italian leather in that pattern. These straps are interchangeable as well, and there's plenty to choose from. Leather, mesh, metal links, tons of great options. Their gift bundles are already discounted by 20%, but you can use this code BTF to get an additional 15% off your order. Their packaging, which is very nice, is actually made out of recycled paper and plastic bottles, and their shipping boxes are made out of FSC certified cardboard paper, which makes sure that the material comes from responsibly managed forests. Nordgreen also has a Giving Back program. They're donating to 3 global NGOs, so for each watch purchased, a portion will be donated to an important cause. And they encourage you to choose the one that most resonates with you. but the causes shall be receiving an equally distributed portion from the watch regardless. So by gifting somebody a Nordgreen watch, you're not only expressing your love for them, but you're also expressing your love for the environment and the world we inhabit by voting with your dollars. So, get 15% off your order by following the link below and using the discount code BTF. Thanks a bunch. In less than 100 pages, I mean, this thing just kind of like floored me with its style, which is just immaculate. It's gorgeous. I don't have the language that is sophisticated enough to impart just how good this writing is. Both Casanova and Napoleon make cameos. It's interesting. Yeah, so Gabrielle Wittkop is quickly becoming one of my favorite authors. She is, in her own words, I believe, a disciple of the Marquis de Sade, but she's very different. She's far more restrained and composed, in a way. But that sort of just adds to the whole thing. I think it's quite intentional on her part. Makes her writing that much more potent. I actually learned about her from my hairdresser. Shout out Jen, thanks a bunch. Who, in her own words, as she put it, is very into death. And I was like, whoa, that's kind of intense. And it turns out she was actually planning on studying mortuary science herself, which is fascinating, I think. Because I think I told her about Bataille and Story of the Eye. And then she recommended to me the Necrophiliac, which I had heard of, but I'd never dug into much. So yeah, Jen recommended Wittkop's first published novel, not her first book, but her first novel ever, published in 1972, when Wittkop was in her 50s already, and that was The Necrophiliac, and I reviewed it back in October for patrons. Link below. Just check it out. So this came almost 30 years later. When it was published, Wittkop was 81, and the next year she killed herself. So she wrote this, after a lifetime of travel, expertise in multiple arenas such as fashion, art, literature, and science. I think she worked at a lab, if I'm not mistaken. She had a wide knowledge, I believe, of plants. Like she had a real botanical knowledge. And she employs it in this short little devious novel for discussing concoctions of poison. So the first thing you might realize is that Gabrielle's first name is French and her surname is German. Let's talk about that, as it's probably the first story that every single article or bio page on her starts with. And for good reason, because it's fascinating. During the war, that is World War II, Gabrielle married a Nazi deserter and hid him in Paris, in occupied Paris. He was much older than her and gay. His name was Justus Wittkop. And they were basically just really good friends. An intellectual alliance was how she referred to her marriage with him. And I think after the end of the war, and everything settled down, they moved over to Frankfurt. And I think that's where she stayed for the rest of her life. So yeah, she was this amazing author who had like this whole lifetime before she started writing novels and began publishing them in the 70s when she was already in her 50s. I think that's amazing. If I'm not mistaken, I think she was actually a European fashion expert as well. I think she wrote a book on it. I don't think it was translated into English, but that definitely shows in her descriptions of clothing in this book. This book is a gothic novel, a history lesson, and a murder mystery. Not only that, but how I interpret it is as also a kind of suicide note. Be sure to watch the whole video to learn why. Just over 100 pages in this edition, which is stunning, by the way. It's a gorgeous looking book. Just over 100 pages in this edition is an impressive demonstration of knowledge in so many different arenas. Art and art history, fashion, botany, food and culinary knowledge, and something like mortuary science. Food in this story is a symbol of death just as much as life. In its simplest terms, it's a murder mystery that takes place in Venice at the end of the Republic, right before Napoleon invades. And the main character is this count. He's kind of a literary aficionado, and he loves books. Count Alvise Lanzi, kind of a upper crust fellow who seems to be a perpetual widower, as his wives are murdered one by one after he marries them, poisoned. And narrative plot is not nearly as important to Wittkop as tone and atmosphere. Sultry, secretive, alluring, and repulsive. There's a deep, lustful darkness in the book, flourishing with physical descriptions of both decadence and decay. Vivaldi's just going through my head the whole time. Very visual book. Yet, so much is kind of hidden in the way that she writes and how the book is structured. She really has a tight leash on what we are able to witness. And because so it's almost an experimental style. I'm not sure if it's non-linear, but it is kind of constantly masked. It's as if you're at Carnivale and you only at night and it's lit by torches and you're only seeing half of people's faces kind of coming out of the crowd with the other half masked, you know, in all these garish, bright, beautiful colors. And maybe you recognize somebody or maybe you don't. And maybe somebody does something or maybe they're not at all. And maybe things are how you thought they were or maybe not, you know? So it's disorienting, it's confusing, it's beautiful, it's very unique. But while the writing is beautiful and the setting is gorgeous, the descriptions of these poisonings or the aftermath especially are so outrageously grotesque in such a Baroque manner, right? It's very, very Sadegh. The exuberance too is so present in her writing, and I'm thinking of like Sadegh, specifically the Sadegh who wrote Philosophy in the Bedroom. That's really kind of the, you know, if you've ever read that one, it's quite something. And but you really see his, it's a kind of a silly pun, but his lust for life, so to speak, in that one. I mean, there's like exclamation points everywhere, if I remember. It's very Nietzschean. In fact, some people think that Nietzsche actually was inspired by Sadegh, and Bataille was one of those people. But anyways, that's a whole tangent. Moving on. The book is really a very beautiful painting. A very beautiful one and a very ugly one as well. That was something that Renaissance art was really capable of. It really, I mean, you just look at paintings from Artemisia Gentileschi, right? You know, the beheading of Holofernes, right? I mean, just the blood and the head coming off and the sword and the guy's neck and everything, and it's just a beautiful painting. You're just like, God, wow. But, you know, Wittkop is doing the exact same thing that Gentileschi was doing with that painting. It very much possesses a tactile, sensual style of something like Patrick Zuskind's Perfume, which itself is about this olfactory prodigy who is a serial killer, who's murdering young women to extract their essence in order to create an astounding scent of his own, because he was actually born without one. Interesting story. Great book. But this book is even more sinister, and with a slightly experimental style that is really prone to total disorientation, in my experience at least. In the beginning and throughout, Wittkop references to herself, you know, kind of the narrator as the Japanese bunraku puppet master. And that's the manner in which she's referring to her characters sometimes as puppets, being pulled this way and that by circumstance and unforeseen forces. We only see, when we're reading, you know, what she chooses to train the camera on, so to speak. She's always in control. She's writing things like, someone is doing this, or somebody's doing that. We never get a full picture of the situation. We slip from room to room and situation to situation, but only being able to look at what she allows us. So as far as the mystery of the story, we do figure out who did it, but it's not really what it's about, you know? It's not really the main focus. So I mentioned earlier that the book is kind of a farewell, if not a suicide note. In 1986, her husband, Eustace Wittkop, was diagnosed with Parkinson's. With Gabrielle's approval, he committed suicide by drinking hemlock. Gabrielle actually wrote a book about it called Hemlock. And yeah, in 2002, after Murder Most Serene was published, itself about a series of poisonings, like her husband, Gabrielle committed suicide by poisoning herself. She had recently been diagnosed with lung cancer, and she wrote to her publisher telling him that, I intend to die as I lived, as a free man. In a way, Wittkop, to me, is the female equivalent of Yukio Mishima, someone who took their own life in a way that they saw fit, on their own terms, in a manner not out of despair, but control, and in no small way blurred the lines between their writing and reality. By no means am I an advocate for suicide, that's not what I'm saying at all. But the willpower and conviction of certain personalities, I don't think anybody can argue, is remarkable. As the wonderful intro by the translator Lalurie says, Wittkop is much possessed by death, but she can be wonderfully life-affirming too. And I absolutely agree with that. In fact, I go so far as to argue that Wittkop herself, from what I've read so far and from what I've heard from her in this interview I've linked to below, I would say that Gabrielle Wittkop would even go so far as to say that her enthusiasm for life, her joie de vivre, in fact stems from her fascination, if not obsession, with death. Or again, like Lalurie says in the intro, the close embrace of Eros and Thanatos, sex and death, right? That is central to Wittkop's work. And that very much comes from the Marquis de Sade. There's this unbelievable exuberance in his writing for being and all that entails. Can be very inspiring, very exciting. Sex and death, and cruelty and joy and hatred and living and dying and fucking and all the disgust and overwhelming ecstasy that accompanies. The torrential cascade of life and energy, right? You know, I mean, we are in fact this strange ball that is, kind of lit by this other enormous dying star stuck in this black space, this void, and that's kind of like where everything is happening. Anyways, it's just, you kind of got to stop to think about these things once in a while, or I do at least. If we could all feel the clock ticking, so to speak, maybe we would all feel a lot more alive than perhaps we often do. Imagine an Italian painting from the 1700s of a beautiful, lavish dinner, wherein all the nobles and refined ladies and gentlemen of the upper crust, garbed in beautiful fabrics in the fashion of the day, all these beautiful colors, have been poisoned or stabbed with swords. All of them. All of these royalty massacred and like lying on the table amidst the food and the flowers that were on the table, and there's blood mixing with the wine and all these things. And this just happened, and the painter has captured the immediate aftermath. But he, or she, has painted it beautifully. You can't help but just look at the mastery of the colors and just go, oh God, but wow, but oh God, but wow, but oh God. And that's what this book is like. Hideous, beautiful. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive. And it's way more interesting to me when they start to, become indistinguishable, right? Starts walking that line. Also, I'd like to mention this video that I've linked to below of the translator, Louise Rogers Lalurie, reading a passage from her great translation of this book. She seems so classy and nice and clean cut. It's just funny because of this book's intensity, so it's great. Anyways, I've chosen to read you, the section that she reads is really quite wonderful. And she did, Lalurie did so much good work in here, anyways. But I chose a particular passage to read for you, a different one. About the dying season, basically. Jubilation flees with a dying howl. At dusk, a funereal plumage, fine strands of black, comes down over the setting sun, and by night, furtive downpours dash the still white, soft-shelled hazelnuts to the ground, awakening the splashes of lichen on the stone, crackling on the gilt effervescence of carrion deep beneath the bushes. Dry-winged achenes rain down from the limes, where the galls nurture horned mites, leaving a tracery of silver, a lacquered sheen and leprous deposits. Summer is dying. It's beautiful. As I mentioned before, there's always this contrast, right? This dichotomy that is always at play between the refined and beautiful and the base and disgusting. She's very much like the filmmaker Peter Greenaway, who was British, but there always seemed to be something very French about him and his films and his work. I've read things that live in the same world, but nothing quite like this little wicked black gem of contradiction. Beautiful. Better than food. If you enjoy stuff that I enjoy, this is going to be up your alley tenfold. So who should read it? Anybody who is a fan of the Marquis de Sade, J.K. Huysmans, Georges Bataille, Octave Mirbeau, Patrick Zuskind, and yeah, maybe if you enjoyed The Name of the Rose by Umberto Eco and the work of Yukio Mishima, check it out. Coffee time. For those of you who are new, thank you very much for watching. I take the names of all the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more per video, and I place their names in this mason jar, and whoever's name I pull out is given a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee, roasted by yours truly. And the coffee is delicious. If you'd like to get in on that, there's more information below and you can click on that link. Thank you so much. Unfortunately, international shipping is not included. Sorry about that. Thank you so much to all the patrons and best of luck. Okay, here we go. Henry, or Henri. Thank you very much, Henry, or Henri. You're going to receive Murder Most Serene by Gabrielle Wittkop, plus a bag of delicious coffee. Hope you love both. Thank you so much. Please subscribe if you have not already, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this, and always remember, bring a book wherever you go. All right, take care of yourselves. Have a great night. Talk to you soon.